All right,
Yeah.
Joshua, you ready to do this?
Let's do it, Guy.
All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Joshua Newman. Joshua, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. Glad to be here.
All right. So Joshua is a licensed professional clinical counselor in private practice and author of The Power of Therapy, How to Navigate Change, Transform Trauma, and Make Sense of Your Mental Health Care. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Religion from Hendrix College and a Master of Arts in Counseling from Southwestern College. Joshua's treatment approach can be described as East-West. He endeavors to blend the best of current evidence-based practices grounded in Western psychology with time-honored contemplative practices rooted in Eastern philosophy. When he's not working, he can be found playing bass guitar, enjoying time in nature. All right, Joshua, welcome to the podcast. Before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay. So Tulsa, Oklahoma is my hometown. That's where I grew up and try to get back there whenever I can. And then now I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I'm still on Route 66.
Nice. All right. All right.
Yeah.
So let's dive in here. How the heck did you get into this field?
Well, it's a great question, and there's a bit of a long answer, but I'll try to stitch the pieces together. So my dad is also a therapist. He's a mostly retired counseling psychologist in Tulsa. And when he was first opening his practice, his very first practice was out of our house in the room that later was my bedroom. After my sister was born and we had to switch rooms, he'd already grown out of the home office and had his own practice. So kind of literally grew up in the field. He's a very influential person on me and would, I think try to bring that energy into our family in terms of how we all had shared values and related with each other. So, I guess that would be the first part in terms of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was one of those people that knew I loved both psychology and spirituality from an early age. When I went to college, I declared my major in psychology and religion and just right off the bat loved what I was studying. It made sense to me. It's where I felt a lot of energy. It was meaningful and exciting. But at one point, I kind of tried to question whether or not that was the path I wanted to take. I view it now as sort of running away from my destiny. But maybe because my father and I are so close and have so much in common, and we've had our conflict along the way too, just like fathers and sons do. But
Sure.
I think I had this fear that if I became a therapist, I would lose my identity. Would I be able to be my own person? So I took a little hiatus after college and explored, other options for my life. Did a lot of traveling out west and visiting national parks and talking to people. And ultimately, while walking in the redwoods with a friend, was like, no, this is what I need to do. I can do it in my own way. I'll be my own person. And so went on to grad school in Santa Fe and completed my training. And then the last piece, which was pretty critical, was my relationship with my mentor, a good friend in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Bill Sims, who really kind of helped me see the potential of what it is to be a trauma therapist.
Okay. So what unfolded? So you got your training, and how did things unfold such that you started getting specifically into trauma?
So in graduate school, we learned, the kind of breadth of everything. And then after that point, I was working in community mental health at a community mental health center in Springdale, Arkansas. And we were working with everybody, the full spectrum of anybody who would present to a mental health clinic. And, it was at times overwhelming, making sense of this profession. What are we actually doing? What are the most effective treatments? And so, I essentially wanted to get more guidance on how to do this job. And the truth is, Bill was originally my therapist. I went to see him in my mid-20s to work through some things, and it was such a powerful experience. I was like,
Mm.
I want to know what this guy knows. What is he doing? It's very effective. It was meaningful. It made sense. So it was sort of like, I want to study what he's doing. And I consider myself kind of a generalist still to this day. But at some level, I feel like all therapy involves an understanding of trauma. I don't know how to look at the human experience without, whether it's capital T or little t trauma, seeing that as a part of the equation. So I don't know
Okay.
if that's answering your question, but that's part of how my journey unfolded.
Great. Yeah. So, okay. So you're in training, you were working at that facility or clinic, and was there something that happened there that made you realize that, you know what, I've got to learn more about trauma? I mean, look, you wrote a book about it, right? What was it that kind of crystallized the importance of trauma?
So wanting a system that makes sense for how to assess what's going on with someone, and really how to intervene in their lives in a helpful and meaningful way. So I wouldn't say there was like one experience.
Sure.
It was more just this desire to be a more effective therapist, and just I think one of the things I like to talk about is, it's about mastering the craft, not mastering the acronyms.
Mm.
I think there was a point where it was like, okay, I've got to learn, CBT and EMDR and, get certifications. There was a part of my mind that is a good student that would be inclined to like try to get all of the trainings out there. And, and
Right.
all those things are effective. There's so many helpful modalities, but in some ways my sense was that wasn't the right path, that it was about just going deeper into understanding what it means to be a therapist and my own particular style of relating with people.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. And I think a lot of people can too. I certainly, when I got into graduate school, wanted to tick or check those boxes, those acronyms and so forth. Your interest in and honoring of spirituality is very interesting to me. How did you bring that into therapy, into the therapy that you do and offered to people?
Well, I would say two ways. One is by attending to my own spirituality, trying to keep my own meditation practice going. I consider myself a lazy Buddhist, but I do try to meditate when I can. And but also just asking my clients about that part of their lives.
Mm,
Not being afraid of those questions. And, I don't want to push anything. In fact, I don't believe there's a right path, but I do think it really helps in this life to have something beyond the self that you believe in, that brings you meaning and joy and purpose. So a lot of it is just inquiring about that. And then if I
mm-hmm.
sense that they're, for some people, it's a very vibrant part of their lives, whether it's their religious tradition or their own personal spirituality, to keep coming back to that in the therapy. How can that be a resource? And with some clients, I have meditated together if they're interested. I let it be known that that's something that I do and that's been helpful for me. And so with a handful of folks, we've done that together. But it's really just about, honoring that person's tradition and making sure that's a part of the work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm wondering if we can get a little more kind of dial down here and get a little more specific. You talked about, when I asked about your kind of realization of the importance of trauma, you said, well, understandably, it wasn't just one thing or one experience. But can you share with us, Joshua, kind of the arc, if you will, of maybe what it was like for you when you realize, you know what, I'm not, there needs to be something more. I'm not seeing something. I want to be more effective. And then when you realize that, well, let me look at trauma more. Can you share maybe an early clinical error, if you will?
Sure. Yeah. And I love that you asked this question, because I think studying our mistakes, studying our errors is part of how we grow as therapists. So, I think there's a lot of rich gold and
Yeah.
kind of going back in there. I've actually made lists of cases that felt incomplete and like, what are the patterns?
Hmm.
So I think, there's kind of two questions in there, but, in terms of an early error, I think it's often when I was trying to do too much too fast, um, trying to problem solve or tinker with some part of the person's life that they had presented, as a source of stress or something more. And I'm thinking about this one woman I was working with. She was a young professional who came in with some a couple of presenting problems. There were some situational stressors, but also a desire to do some deeper work. And maybe session 5 or 6, I started asking about this one element of her life that seemed to be where a lot of the stress was. But there was this like little voice inside saying, "Don't go there," and but I didn't listen to that voice, and then she just didn't come back the next session.
Don't go. The voice was saying, "Don't go there." Why? Why do you think?
Well, so here's my take now is that, when we meet with clients that have experienced trauma in their lives, there's part of them that's saying, "I'm drowning, save me." And
Hmm.
then there's another part of them in their unconscious that's saying, "Can I trust you? Are you going to try to control me? Are you going to abandon me? Are you going to, do all the things that, the people in my life that have hurt me have done?" And so as therapists, I think we have to pass that test while dealing with our own desire to be helpful and be seen as competent, so there's a lot going on in those encounters. And it feels like the therapy goes really well when it's, my true self having a conversation with your true self, and
Hmm.
we're in that alignment. So I think as I get older and have worked longer, I've learned how to listen more to that inner voice and slow down, to make sure that the interventions aren't getting in front of the state of the relationship.
Mm.
Um,
Well said. Yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. So that voice, if I'm hearing you correctly, was more of it was interested in the story in a sense. It was more, maybe more for you rather than for the client.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's like I've got my own insecurities. I want to look competent. I want to be helpful. And then there's just that compassionate, part of like, you see somebody across from you and they're suffering and you
Right.
you think you know what the solution is. I'm like, oh yeah, why don't you, stop doing that side job? That's what's making you miserable. But that wasn't, I mean, and I'll never know why this person didn't come back. I'll never know. But that's my best guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it might have been more for me to say that than what she
Hmm.
needed to hear in that moment.
So let's talk about the power of therapy. Who is it for? Why did you write it, and so forth?
Well, that's a great question. So I would say it's primarily for 2 or 3 audiences. One would be somebody who's never been in therapy and would like a resource, a guidebook to kind of help them get oriented, make sense of it, know what to expect. Just like somebody who's about to take a trip. And, if they're going to go to Italy and they want that, they get that guidebook to help them really, optimize their experience. I would also say it's for seasoned clients that are looking to go deeper, that want deeper therapy. It's filled with little moments of like, ask your therapist this, conversation starters. Um, I've got a whole chapter on dreams. I think a lot of therapists don't work with dreams anymore. It used to
Hmm.
be, central part of psychotherapy. And so, I'm a big champion of the power of dreams, um, but just for individual growth, but also as a way to advance therapy. So I would say it's for anybody that has any interest in therapy that wants to get the most out of it and be able to go deeper within it.
And therapists themselves, how might they benefit from this?
So that would be a third group. Yeah, I think there's, basically throughout it is my thought process as a therapist. I try to be transparent about how I think, how I work, what I found helpful in my practice. And, it's broken down into 4 parts. So the first part is really getting oriented. And that's more for the client side in terms of finding a therapist and what to expect and that sort of thing. But the second part is called the journey, and it's all about the journey of change. and different ingredients that can support and accelerate that journey. So I think that part could be helpful for therapists that are looking for, other frameworks and tools. And then the third part's all about relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because so much of what brings people into therapy is when relationships are going off track, or just the need to process things are happening in relationships. And then the fourth part's kind of an A to Z for all the major issues that bring a person into therapy. Just a quick little essay on those main presenting problems.
Okay. And the book, again, The Power of Therapy, How to Navigate Change, Transform Trauma, and Make Sense of Your Mental Health Care. People can access that where? Amazon?
It's on Amazon.
Okay. Okay.
And at some local bookstores here in Albuquerque, if you got any local listeners. But yeah, I think most folks are just going to find it on Amazon.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask you this. What is it about you, about yourself, do you feel that allows you to do this work, to get in there and be with people?
That's a really good question. I think it's my commitment to myself and my own journey as a human being, to try to live a good life according to my values, to lead an examined life, and to practice what I preach, and to be committed to growing as a therapist. To study. I love the principles you talk about. One of them is studying the masters. I think therapy is a sacred lineage, and to really try to understand that lineage.
Mm-hmm.
So to be honest, it's just where I feel at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I came back to it. I had mentioned kind of having that moment of sort of having a bit of doubt about, do I want to do this for my life, for my career? And when I really asked the question, the answer was yes. And when I'm in session with a client, it's where I feel at home. Being with them, being present with whatever they have to bring. And ultimately that's because I trust my clients. I trust them to find their answers, to be able to walk their journey.
Was it always like that for you as a therapist? Was it that you always did trust them, or even understand the value of trusting them? Was that something that?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, like I said, growing up with my dad as a therapist, I think I had this really strong role model of what it looks like to do this kind of work, and so I think I always did have that sense of the human spirit, and that positive view.
Mm-hmm.
But did I have doubt in my early career? Absolutely. I still do. There's still days when I'm like in session, like what is exactly going on? There's like 1,000 things happening, in the room, in terms of all the features of the person's situation that you could attend to. I don't know. I don't know if I'm hitting your question right, but
You are. It's just there. You have a very interesting background and experience, and I think draw from, especially with your interest in spirituality. So it's interesting to hear your take on these things. One of the things I'd like to touch on is your thoughts on the role of spirituality within the context of trauma, and someone who's experienced trauma. What's been your experience in terms of maybe how you've seen certain clients deal with maybe questions about spirituality when they've experienced trauma and so forth?
I think at its essence, spirituality is about awe. Having a sense of awe in life, in nature, in the divine, whatever it is that makes you feel that feeling. I think it goes beyond words. And, I think with trauma, a lot of times the view gets really narrow. You become threat oriented, fight or flight, hypervigilance. There can be a lot of interpersonal mistrust. And so, at some level, we're always trying to invite our clients into a bigger story into a bigger view of reality. And I think spirituality is one of the vehicles that we can use to help with that. Now, if a client already has faith tradition or a natural relationship with nature, or, some sort of practice, um, then it's a lot easier, because you're just sort of like pointing them back towards something that they already resonate with. And they're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is where I feel more alive, or where things make more sense. So you're helping them to kind of reground in that resource that they already have. I think it's harder when they were traumatized by religion, or by the
Mm-hmm.
faith tradition they were raised in, or if they're sort of cynical, as a lot of people are today, where there's not that bigger view of the world and the universe. So in that case, the therapy involves a little more heavy lifting of like trying to inspire, trying to find ways, and so a lot of times I'll recommend songs, or movies, or things like that, trying to
Mm-hmm.
point toward a story, or something that's got an energetic quality that's going to help them, to feel that awe, to feel a connection to
Right.
something beyond the self. So it's not one size fits all. It's
Yeah.
always, what can I work with that's part of you and your story, that's going to help you find that frequency, or that bigger view of life.
So are you working primarily one-on-one? Do you offer groups or what?
I am primarily working one-on-one. For a while, I was doing a fair amount of couples work and family work too, but I've kind of recently made a pivot toward doing just primarily individual therapy, which is what I've done throughout most of my career and what I feel most comfortable doing.
Um, okay. So where your website, what's the name of your website? Where can people reach you?
www.janewman.com.
Okay. J.A. Newman. All right. I'll have that linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Once again, the book is called The Power of Therapy, How to Navigate Change, Transform Trauma, and Make Sense of Your Mental Health Care. Let me ask you this, kind of as we kind of wind down here, what do you feel therapists out there who are listening to this need to know about working with trauma? And then I want to ask you about the importance of bringing spirituality into the room too. But first, what do you feel they need to or could benefit from learning about the importance of working with trauma?
Great question. So I think it's about having a view of what health looks like. It's like, where are we trying to help our clients to go? And so obviously with trauma, we have to understand, we have to have a really clear assessment of what's going on with the person we're working with, where are they wounded, where are they blocked, and that sort of thing. But, that's only one side of the coin. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what does health and vitality look like? Because that's where we're trying to help our clients go. So keeping that in focus.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, just the importance of, doing your own work, be in therapy yourself, so you're having a clear inventory of your landmines, or your issues, your blind spot, so to speak. So I think it's, a commitment to growth as a person, and, but yeah, having that view of what health is like, because at some level we become the role models that our clients are relating to.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
healing through relationships.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Going back to what you said in the beginning about your father being uh, a role model in a sense, with that experience, was it easy for you to kind of bring yourself into the room with your clients, to be yourself, to um, find or share your own authenticity? What was that like for you?
I would say I'm still growing into that, to be honest with you, Guy. I can't tell you how many times I've been in session and I've thought to myself, like, what would my dad say right now? Or what would Bill say right now? Or some other hero I have that's wise and, always has a really amazing thing to say at any given point. But there has been a journey of just trusting myself, my own individual expression. And it's interesting. I will share this. So, one of the things my dad does a lot of is share poems. He'll a lot of times, a person will tell a story or have a trouble, and he'll say, that reminds me of a poem. And he's got just dozens of poems memorized.
Wow.
That really fit. And so I think there's a part of me that resisted, well, I can't just do that, but I'm a music lover. I play music. It's where I
Cool.
get a lot of joy personally. And so I find that I'm recommending songs. I did that earlier today. A client was talking about something and it just totally keyed off a song, a Peter Gabriel song, Love to Be Loved. And I was like, I want you to go listen to this song. So yeah, it's been a journey, to find more and more of my authentic self and bring it into the therapy office.
Awesome. I love that. All right. So how about a go-to book recommendation? Not yours, which we'll also
Sure.
obviously have linked up here at the show notes page, but anything trauma related, spiritual, the
Nature Fix.
Okay. Awesome.
Florence Williams. Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative. It is amazing. I read it when I was writing my book for research. Another author suggested it to me, and
cool.
Man, I'm actually rereading it.
Wow.
It is amazing. I think she's a journalist by trade, but her family moved from Boulder, Colorado to Washington, D.C., and it was very jarring for her, going from a more natural environment to a more urban environment that was noisy and so on and so forth. And her book is filled with all kinds of empirical research for how nature is therapeutic, how it makes us more creative, how it makes our minds more still. She travels to Japan and Finland and the deserts of Utah and everywhere in between. And it's just filled with really great stories and research about the therapeutic and cognitive benefits of nature.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. So the Nature Fix, Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative by Florence Williams. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com, along with Joshua's book, The Power of Therapy, How to Navigate Change, Transform Trauma, and Make Sense of Your Mental Health Care. Joshua, awesome, man. Great to meet you, and really privileged to have you joining me on the podcast today.
Well, Guy, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, man. We'll be in touch.
All right, man. Take care.
All right.